You're listening to How I Sell, a podcast built for early career sales professionals. You'll hear stories, best practices, and guidance from top sales leaders on what it takes to become a sales superstar. Today's episode is made possible by Ramped Careers. Ramped is on a mission to build the next generation of workforce-ready talent. Joining us today is Courtney Griffin, VP of Sales at Improvado. Courtney has held sales leadership roles at Pinpoint Predictive and Owner IQ. Really impressive background. Thank you so much, Courtney, for joining us today.
Thank you both for having me.
Courtney, for those that don't know you, who is Courtney Griffin?
Let's see. I am passionate about my career. I mean, in my personal life as an individual, I like to spend a lot of time with family, friends. I played tennis in college. I play music on the regular. So I have lots of different personal things that I do. But yeah, I like to really spend time with the people around me. And then I spend quite a bit of time at work, candidly.
That's impressive. I'm so glad to hear that you play tennis. It's something that I picked up much later on in life, and I've gotten reasonably good at. So it's always a pleasure to connect with other folks that appreciate the game as much as I do.
Yeah, if you're ever out in San Francisco, we should play. See how it goes.
I'm going to take you up on it. Looks like you're a little bit competitive, so I'm going to come in with some apprehension. But that's great. Hey, one of the things that I see, and it looks like, you seem to like this quote from Simon Sinek, right? And it reminds me of this concept of ikigai, right? The reason for being, the Japanese quote. But essentially it boils down to feeling inspired and safe and grateful and fulfilled about the work that we do. His view, and I think you share the same sentiment, is that that's something that everyone is entitled to. And it's not this abstract notion of luxury that is only afforded to some. With that as a backdrop, right, is that something that you felt early on in your career, or is that something that you've kind of learned and refined over time?
Yeah, and maybe that's a better way of jumping into the deep question of who I am. But definitely, I would say it's evolved throughout my career. I mean, early in my career, I generally feel like we spend most of our time at work. So everyone should feel safe, comfortable, like they're achieving, fulfilled, right, in general, in their life, and certainly where they spend a majority of their time. So earlier in my career, when I was just starting, I got this idea, but I also thought that I had to be kind of a professional robot of sorts. Like there was a certain box that I had to fit in. And so because I didn't understand the workplace, I think I erred more on that side, more risk averse to like exposing elements of my personality or who I am. And then as I started to work and understood that this is where I'm spending all of my time, building relationships and being authentic is actually a huge value. I'm valuable. I want to find companies that want to understand who I am and what I care about there. That started to evolve. And then, eventually in my career, which we'll, I'm sure dive into later, moved into management where I was able to enable that for my team and make people feel safe. It's very different from, a boss, sales individual relationship than when you're just selling as an individual contributor. So definitely something I've always felt has definitely evolved as I've moved throughout my career.
And I guess kind of going back in time to your point, truly believe that a lot of others feel the same way. When you're starting out, right, beyond grades, there's really not very many things that you can hang your hat on for affirmation, right? I feel like confidence builds over time just because of the value of experiences that you've had. 10 years ago, I was very apprehensive and scared. I felt like I was not worth very much and that I had to prove a lot in order to be recognized as a meaningful member of society. And it looks like, your thinking was somewhat similar. Is that a mischaracterization? Is that a fair way of thinking about it?
Yeah. I mean, early in your life, as you grow up in your life, you're always measured in some way. So you can people I've seen tend to assign some level of value to that, like your grades. Or for me, I played tennis. So I could see how well I was doing in these things that I cared about. It was very measured and clear. Like I won or I lost. And then, when you get into your career, it's a lot, especially when you're first starting, that's a lot more difficult to understand like how you're doing and how to evaluate how you contribute in the part of something much larger. Because also you can be not successful in some positions and it doesn't have anything to do with you, honestly. But that is certainly a good characterization of how I feel.
That kind of context as the backdrop, you graduated from school, you have a degree in psychology, you played tennis. If I had to take a wild guess, I would say that you did pretty well in college. How did you land in sales? I mean, I see that you did really well. If there's anything that epitomizes like success in every role, it's you. I would encourage all of our viewers or listeners to just go to your LinkedIn profile, and all I see is like success after success. But how did you did you want to be in sales? Was there someone in your family? How did you end up at the job that you did?
Well, I'll tell you the real story. I mean, so first of all, I got a degree in philosophy, which I feel like is not as good as or not socially considered as strong. Yeah.
Was it philosophy? Even better.
Yeah. It's like my parents were in college, we had a conversation where they were concerned that I was going to live out of a box. They're like, what are you going to do with the philosophy degree? And at that time, actually, I was considering law school. I didn't know. So I was like, you learn logic. I like to think about things. That's just, that's also a part of me. And I was like, if I'm paying for this education, I want to actually learn something I like. And so I went to a liberal arts school. So I learned many different categories of things. It wasn't just philosophy, but yeah. And then, so I did what I liked despite advice from people who, should know more from me. And I think that's kind of a theme in my career also that I'd encourage everyone to think about, because I always kind of knew that was what was right for me. I just didn't know how it would turn out in the end. Then, you graduate. And my grades were good, but they weren't that good. I got like above average grades, they weren't perfect. So, and what I'll tell everyone to kind of demystify coming out of college too, is that you just have to show some level of like commitment and success. You don't need to have straight A's. And then when you interview, everyone looks the same on paper. So there's tons of different things you can do in the interview process that'll impress somebody and show your hiring manager what you're about. And it's not just your GPA. Like if you have a 3.5 or a 3.0, someone who, depending on, what you're interviewing for, a lot of sales roles, like you're going to be fine if you exhibit the profile that they're looking to hire. So anyway, so that was college. Back to your question around like, how did I decide I wanted to be in sales? I didn't. My dad was a salesman, his career. So I had some background, learning from him there, mostly learning how to interview, honestly, was helpful. I interviewed for some jobs. I interviewed in marketing, just like whoever would take a philosophy major. And eventually I got a position from an alumni from my college who gave me a chance. And that's really what got me into the workforce. It was a guy who thought I was a hungry kid, wanted to learn, from my small liberal arts school and wanted to give me a chance. And that's really all it was.
So you start this job and you say that, I don't know if it's accurate to say that you got lucky. Maybe it's a combination of you're putting yourself out there, right? You're applying for jobs. You were arguably very good at interviewing, and maybe that's a skill that you picked up from family, but that still doesn't explain how you did so well in your first job. A lot of folks struggle. Yeah. What happened there, and what did you do right to see the type of success that you saw so early on professionally?
Yeah, and it wasn't all. It was like doing the work to put yourself in the right position at the right time, and somebody giving you a shot. So you're certainly that's a good point, but. I worked my ass off, and I made it clear to my boss that I wanted to do anything he needed. And I was so grateful for the opportunity. And this was in 2010. So there was like this, I'm a millennial. There's lots of like stereotypes around millennials, like not being grateful and all of that. Like I wanted my work and my actions to show that was not, the stereotype was not, who I am. And so I did lots of different work. I started as a sales coordinator, which is really what an SDR is today. So I managed inbound leads. It took up an hour of my day. And to qualify them off to the sales team. So I would find other things to do. I self-started in that way. There was no job that was beneath me. I put labels on things. So I think that kind of attitude and, showing up for the company and showing your work ethic. I mean, my profile, like when I'm being hired, especially when I was an individual contributor in this way, was like a hardworking, individual who's hungry to learn and will do anything. Team player, good culture fit. That was my profile. And I would really encourage anyone going through this that most good hiring managers, if they see a young talent like that, hungry, hardworking, grateful, nothing beneath them, a good culture fit, that's a rare talent. So if you can, kind of harness that in yourself, that was what made me so successful early on, and the advice that I would give to other individuals in the start of their career.
Let me ask you a slightly more tactical question. And we'll go back to this idea of finding fulfillment with whatever you choose to do for work. One way of looking at it is you have to put in some effort in order to be able to realize it, right? It's just not going to be given to you. And so you can ask yourself the question, what are the levers that I can control? One lever you can control is where you choose to work. The second lever you can control is what do you do when you show up to work, right? So those are the two things that are in your control. Other stuff completely out of your control is nothing you can do. As an early career professional that's looking at their first job in sales or second job in sales, when you don't know as much, right, what can you do to pragmatically control those levers so that you make that right decision, so at least you give yourself the best possible shot to succeeding?
I think when it comes to the first, like where you work, you have a lot less control because you don't have a track record in the work world. You only have so many companies that are hiring for the most entry-level position. What I would encourage with that first piece is to go somewhere that you're passionate, especially in sales, passionate about the product, passionate about the people. You can't go somewhere that you don't believe in. This doesn't mean it doesn't have to be Google or Facebook, like my first job was at an 18-person startup in Chicago that no one knew about. And they ended up getting acquired and did pretty well. I didn't know that then, but the first opportunity I got, I liked the product, the idea of it. I was hungry to learn in that space. That was enough for me in that area. The bigger piece that you can control, and I love how you put that, because throughout your whole career, you should always be thinking about like, what do I have control over? What do I have influence? What is just completely outside of that realm? You can control what you show up to do. And so again, that's when it comes to constantly showcasing like who you are in that profile. In sales, just hit your number, and if you have, that's a really great way early on to show that you're valuable. Just hit your numbers, talk to your boss, be candid to your boss about like how you think you can do that, come up with creative ideas, get their input to do that, but showcase that overall profile and make sure that you're hitting the expectations that have been set for you.
And, kind of going down that line of questioning another level deeper, a lot of companies today, especially B2B businesses, when you come in as an entry-level sales professional and you're trying to hit your numbers, you're tasked with having to sell into people that have 20 years over you, right? They're senior business leaders, decision makers that have some VP or some C or some director title in front of them. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have a college graduate that's a little bit shaky, a little bit apprehensive, hasn't really found their footing. And that's something that I see today, right? When sometimes I'm sure you get cold calls and cold emails from SDRs, and there's a bit of nervousness, there's a little bit of apprehension. It doesn't feel like it's a discussion of peers. It almost feels like there's one person at this level and there's another one at that, and it shouldn't be that way. How did you kind of navigate it? Because the other thing that I'm kind of looking at all of the work that you've done, it looks like you've been, I don't know if forced is the right word, but put in a position where you've had to sell into these really large enterprise accounts, super senior folks. How did you manage that? Did you have any apprehension going in?
I wouldn't say that. I think that's kind of, in general, I think you always have a choice how you feel about most things. Like some days you don't want to feel that way, or some days you just like can't make that choice, but you always, it's always there. And so I never viewed it, this sounds so cliche, but this is honestly how I view my life. I never was apprehensive or felt like I felt like it was a huge opportunity. And so like early on, I was so excited to be selling into even like mid-level individuals, never mind like very, very senior level individuals at companies. So I think having that confidence, knowing that you're going to mess up and it's going to be okay. Like I messed up so many times early in my career on a call. Like I just like forgot the value prop, or like, you're making so many, like that just happens. And knowing that that's okay and feeling safe in your work environment where it's like, next time I'll do better. Really having that kind of mindset was the foundation for everything. And then when you're actually on the call with these people, like some more, I guess, tactical advice I could give is be human. No one's going to yell at a kid out of college who's just like trying their best, And so if you're on the call with somebody who has a longer career, and you're like messing up, you can just say, hey, I just started here a couple months ago. My boss, talked to me about how important your account is in this meeting. I would really just love to get you guys on a call. Mm-hmm. And that makes like the other individual, like it's authentic. Like you can never go wrong with being authentic, and it can help you actually convert, to a meeting, which is typically how you're gold early on. And no one's going to say, that makes the other side feel special, like they're being talked about, you're being real. Everyone always appreciates that. And that can kind of help get you through those moments. But the biggest thing is that everyone is in that spot. Like everyone around you, whether or not you can see that, they all feel that way. So that's just good to know as sanity.
I love how you reframe the question from apprehensive about speaking to prospect X or prospect Y to I'm excited that I have the opportunity to speak to this person, right? It's a complete reframing of the issue. And then taking comfort in the fact that it's not the end of the world if you mess up, and everybody else around you is in the same boat. That's just such a nice way of reframing it. For anyone that's listening, this is someone that's been there, done it, and real helpful advice. So thank you, Courtney, for that. And Danny, I know you've been itching to ask Courtney about all her trade secrets on how she crushed quota at Owner IQ. So on to you.
I want to jump in. I was definitely excited to have you on the podcast and excited to chat with you a little bit more specifically about your impressive sales track. One thing that jumped out at me though about what you previously said, and something that I teach junior sellers and really any salesperson, is just be human. And it's more evident for me in the qualification process when you're reading off this list of just cookie cutter questions and it can come off as an interrogation. Instead, if you just humanize that experience a little bit more, treat it like there's a person on the other side of the phone and instead of just this static prospect. I think that's really great. And it's so basic, but often forgotten. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I can't agree anymore. There's all these like sales frameworks that teach you how to cold call and email. And it's like, be yourself, and some like make sure they know it's you and not some automated system hit. Cause I don't respond to any of those that I get that I know is automated. It's like, I want to feel like I'm talking to someone. If you take the time, or at least make it seem like you're taking the time, it's just like a basic principle. But yeah, completely agree, Dan.
That's right. Your impressive track record at Owner IQ, this appeared to be, if not an inflection point, then certainly the ramp up at your career, because it's supremely impressive, right? You made President's Club year after year. You were promoted from senior AE to VP of sales for the West. Was it the right mix of people? Was it the right training? What made you so successful there?
So Owner IQ is definitely the biggest piece of my career so far. And just to kind of tie this back to the start so everyone understands how this evolved. I mean, my first job, I was making $20,000 out of college. My next job, I realized, when I realized I wanted to leave, I made, I think around like 70 with an OT, like a real OTE to double that. And then I moved over to Owner IQ, which was, to answer your question, just right place at the right time. I didn't know this when I was interviewing. I was actually interviewing Owner IQ and Facebook and everything. A lot of the people that I respected that were my friends and career people were obviously telling me what a great opportunity Facebook is and all of this stuff. And the process was just really slow. And I got the opportunity at Owner IQ. And I decided to try it. I had a couple things that really helped me evolve through Owner IQ. So I had a fantastic boss. I showed up for him. So I constantly put myself positioned early on. So I started as an AE there, and I had a really small book, secondary states in the Midwest. The rest of my peers had really big, giant accounts in Chicago. I didn't have that. I just went and did work. And so then I'd find revenue out of these like smaller secondary accounts that weren't used to being called on. And they took my calls quicker and they were more appreciative of what I did. And that helped me get to my AE goals at that time. So President's Club, the first 2 years. Yeah. And then my book built on itself. So it kind of compounded in that way. And so then eventually I realized that at this time I'd spent about 5 years as an individual contributor. And I realized I wanted more for myself. I wanted to continually challenge myself. So I made it known to my boss that I wanted to move into a management type position. I think that part is critical. Like, make sure your boss has so much going on at all times. They can try, especially at certain size companies like startup, might not have the resources, or it's not like their number one fire that day to think about your career track, even though they could genuinely care. make sure that they know how you want to grow. And so I made that really obvious to my boss, who was wonderful. And basically they said, we just promoted someone here, but the West Coast is falling apart. And if you want to go try and pick up the pieces there, you can do that. And so that's what I did. So I moved out to San Francisco. I inherited a very ineffective region. It was very challenging. But again, and I genuinely feel like this, I didn't view it as this thing that I could fail at. I viewed it as a giant opportunity in my career. And that's what but yeah, having a boss who understands and believes in you is really important. Putting up some early numbers is really important. Showing up with that type of work profile is hugely important to put yourself in position to get to that next step.
Great advice. Again, coming back to a theme that we heard earlier, but really this reframing or maybe innate positivity and optimism that I hear from you and what we've heard from many other sales leaders to just overcome what seems to be a challenge with change in attitude or change in perspective right off the bat. So I love hearing that. Tell me about what that transition was like, though. So you're, obviously a top closer, and now you're in charge of, looks like 7 individuals and have to guide them and don't have as much control over your own destiny, but arguably have more responsibility and more pressure on. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, that transition from individual contributor to leadership really was the hardest transition in my career to date by far, for a number of reasons. Peers were my friends before to start. So even though I was posting numbers that was at the top of the leaderboard, people will just have opinions about you or put a better way, some people just aren't going to want to work for you. For instance, I had one of my really close friends at the time. She was my peer, and then she was working for me. The best advice that I can give anyone going through this transition is that that's okay. It says nothing about you or them, that they don't have to want to work for you. If that's the case and somebody's not on the bus, then you just help them leave, or you encourage them to find something out so that both parties are happy. But there was a lot of transition in terms of understanding who was truly on the bus for the way that I was going to run the region. And that was really challenging to navigate. And then at the same time, you're asking yourself, like, am I going to be good at this? This is the first time I've managed, and you really just have to trust your instincts. Like if you've been, successful in the past, like if everyone else can do it, why can't you? And just be really, really strong in those interpersonal transitions. And don't take things personally, but just realize that you really need to make sure that your team wants to work for you. And then you can go hire other people. So, yeah, it was challenging that way. Having people take me seriously as a manager. I mean, when I was promoted to run the Western region at Owner IQ, I think I was 26 or 27. I was very young. That was probably a very big thing. Like my boss at one point, who was my biggest fan, he was like, I don't know if I can promote you into this because of how old you are. That's wild. And so for me, I'm like, I'm going to get the job done, put the right person in the job. And eventually after years of that kind of, conversation, that's what happened. But so there was definitely stigma around how young I was and single. And there are definitely those kind of socialized things, but you kind of have to put that out of your mind and just do all the work. But yeah, that transition was very messy with all of that type of stuff.
Thanks for sharing that. I went through a similar transition in my first role at Groupon, where I, for lack of a better word, graduated from account executive into managing the team that I was selling on. And it was difficult. So I know that's not an easy thing to always share, and appreciate it. And our audience will appreciate the fact that you shared that. I have another question off that. You mentioned all these things that could have been reasons that folks didn't want to necessarily work for you. One was age, one was potentially your peers now became your subordinates or whatnot. Do you think it was those things alone? Was there a component of it that was potentially gender related?
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, and also I think personality related, I recently co-founded a Burning Man camp. That was like a big part of my life. And there's stigma around that depending on like where you live and what that means. I think my hair was blue at the time. I mean, this goes back to like wanting to, be yourself at work and understanding those boundaries. At that point in my life, I was unapologetic about, my work, all my numbers were there, my actions were there. Like, why do any of these other things matter? So that's a very personal choice for people. But I think like the package around like my physical, identity, like how I appeared, my gender, my age, all kind of packaged into this at the time that made some people concerned or not sure if I'm going to be able to lead a team of people, because that's very different, particularly some older individuals who, but yeah, it was a complicated package, I think, for people to understand.
Thanks for sharing that as well. And having gone through that, and it sounds like it wasn't easy, and more kudos to you to breaking through that and strive and thriving in that environment. It looks like you still crushed it and your numbers were great and had a long, impressive career as a manager. What advice could you share with our audience, especially folks that are potentially coming from diverse backgrounds or who are females, to give them a leg up so they don't have to battle some of the obstacles that you may have faced at this difficult time in your career?
I think as long as, you advocate for yourself, you put yourself in. I was fortunate to be surrounded by people that, my boss at the time, he understood my work ethic and my ability to execute on whatever I was given. So I was fortunate. If you're at a company where you don't have that, you should leave, because that's totally different. So I was still struggling with those things in a place that was relatively supportive. They just, were confused, or I don't know how to put that, but I'll say just focus on your work, trust your gut, and continue to keep your head down and do that work. Advocate for yourself and really maintain your integrity. I can give you this example. After my first year managing, we were the only region I was the only region that won President's Club that year. So we just fired on all metrics. We did a fantastic job. And next year, my boss came to me and he said, I'm thinking about promoting this younger guy who had been successful as an individual contributor on the East Coast. There was so much turmoil around putting me into this role, but there was none of that and so he's like, how would you feel if we put this person into this role tomorrow? Basically was the context of the conversation. I felt great. He was super capable. He was wonderful. He should be in that role. And I told him that, all ships rise. If we're, the more people that are successful here and putting the right people in position, irregardless of how they're perceived in some ways, that was an opportunity and that's how I actually felt. That was an opportunity for me to say, I don't feel threatened by this other person at all. He's incredibly capable. You should promote, you should not worry about because of the person that I am, I would never feel I need to hold somebody back because of the experience that I had here. And so I think that also helped the executive team understand who I was more. And it's just time, letting that play out and letting people see that.
Thank you for sharing that. Truly, truly appreciate that. And for our audience, Courtney just dropped some serious knowledge on all of you. One, you got to have your own back, especially when facing promotion or team changes. If you're not going to have it, no one else will. Two, focus on the work. This is super, super important. And three, grow the pie together. Teamwork makes the dream work is the cliche way to put it, but it's super true, especially at startups. If you don't all build together, the startup will fail and it will fall apart. So thanks for sharing all of those, Courtney. Is really great. I want to switch gears a little bit. You've gone on to you moved on from Owner IQ and on to Pinpoint Predictive and now Improvado. And as a manager at both stops, do you subscribe to a specific sales management style?
I identify as a servant leader. So for anyone who doesn't know what that it basically means, I serve my team, empathize with my team. I listen to what they say. I expect them to bring me what's in their way. My job is to get it out of their way. I want to make sure that they're doing well from a mental health perspective and that they're happy in their career. They understand how they're growing. And I think all of those things ultimately leads to an effective workforce. That doesn't mean I don't manage them to their metrics. We meet every week around exactly what they need to do. I help them see things that they can't see by themselves. That's a huge part of my position. But I hope that I would like to think that the people that work for me, we all empathize with each other. And I've never really worked in a hyper competitive, cutthroat sales environment. Because especially in this part of my career, we don't create it like that. It's definitely, we share resources, we help each other. That is how we all get to our goal. And I'd like to think that my team, we all are just very empathetic and open with each other. And that's how we're successful.
Do you have advice, or put differently, what are some of the things that today's SDRs and BDRs are doing well, especially in this COVID or virtual environment?
That's a good question. So I think the same fundamentals ring true even in COVID. I just hired a BDR that's performing very well, and he has a very hungry, grateful, open, willing to do anything, critical thinking mentality. So it's hiring the right profile. I think in COVID, it's interesting because, where you reach people is different. So we've been doing a lot of testing and what channels, the effect that has on cold calling, how people feel about, getting calls to their personal devices. Candidly, we've been relying a lot on LinkedIn and email channels. It's just thinking critically about the problem and the state of the world that we're in. And so Aaron, our current leader and outbound, he's been having a lot of success just leaning into those channels at a high volume. He has just really leaned into what's working. That happens to be what's working for us right now. So it's really, just thinking about what's working for you and your company at this time. And, that's been the story for us.
I have 2 more questions for you before we get you out of here.
Sure.
The first is, could you tell us a bit more about how BDRs and SDRs can work best with their AE counterparts now that you've seen a few different organizations do it, I presume, pretty well?
Yeah, that's interesting too. So every organization, it seems these days, is or doing this differently. So it really depends on how, you have SDR, BDR pairings. You can be a shared resource in one team or market segmentation. At the core of everything is having a good relationship with these people on both sides. So it sounds very cliche, but it's super important to have an authentic relationship. So you want to talk to your AE and be what's your priority? They should be bringing you ideas. You should be bringing them ideas. It's a fair exchange of value that should be in everything in the work world. So I think having that kind of that relationship and being able to do that, set up formal time to talk to them and kind of go through the problems and attack the accounts together, depending on how you're organized. I think that's huge. I think for the AEs too, making sure you have a clear understanding, that's really basic stuff, but of what an SQL is, what qualifies as that. Some startups, it's very ambiguous, or the AE decides a little bit more. You want to make sure that you both are on the same page there, and then you're producing things that look like that. But at the core of this is just making sure everyone's on the same page, using the same language, the same way, having a relationship and collaborating on a weekly basis on both sides to accomplish the overall meeting goal or SQL goal.
Yeah, another great answer, and you simplified it in words that we often speak about with the folks in our program, but I think you put it a little more clearly. With it, just all comes down to just basic communication, and just, again, treating folks like they're humans, not like they're your prospect or not like they're your AE. And I think that's really well stated. Last question before we let you go is, if you could go back in time now, that you have the benefit of hindsight, what advice would you give yourself, Courtney, coming out of college, way back in the day, or not so far back, just back in the day?
Yeah, I would. I think the best piece of advice I can give anyone in this position is and it's very cliche, sorry guys, but so true. You have to trust your gut and who you are, and that will prevail in every circumstance. All of the inflection points in my career, when I was going through something or trying a new position or new accounts that people told me I wasn't qualified for, whatever this is, because that's been a lot of my career. At the end of the day, I trusted who I am and my capability, and that is what pushed me through and allowed me to hit the numbers I needed to and continue to progress through my career. So I had those moments where I was like, am I doing the right thing? You will have those in your career a lot. And at the end of the day, you just have to know and rely on that you're incredibly capable. You are fantastic at what you do. And if you feel weaker in some areas, get a mentor or take a course or talk to your boss about the things that you can do to up that skill that you feel, but always listen to yourself and your gut. And as long as you do that, you will be fine and your career will be successful, carry through any kind of adverse moments that come with being in the workplace.
Great advice. And again, a theme that we've heard throughout this interview, believe in yourself, trust yourself, and look out for yourself, have your own back. Courtney, it's been a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for coming onto the pod. And there's so much that our students and our audience will learn from this episode. Again, we appreciate it so much. And I hope to have you back on someday in the future after your next illustrious stop at your career, where you can drop some more knowledge on all of us.
That's very kind. Thank you both for having me so much.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you. See ya.